Hello students. So today we are going to see Unit 1 on Life on Earth ICSE syllabus, Biology, Class 6th. Learning objectives, characteristics of living beings, unicellular and multicellular organisms, differences in living and non-living things, differences in plants and animals. These are the four topics which we are going to discuss in this chapter, Unit 1, Life on Earth. Moving on. Our first topic is living and non living things. Biology is the science of life. In life science, we study the life processes of living organisms. Dogs, cats, and plants are living, while stone, milk, chalk are non living. All life activities of an organism take place in a cell. Here they have mentioned that they have compared and contrast living and non-living things. So, in case of living things or living organisms, dogs, cats, and plants, animals. So, dogs, cats come under the category of animals, and plants are living, whereas stone, milk, chalk, these are non-living. All life activities of an organism takes place in a cell. So, in case of living organism, all the activities of an organism takes place in a cell. All organisms have certain characteristics by which they can be differentiated from non-living things. Let us study the characteristics of living beings. So now we are going to study one by one the characteristic of living beings such that we can easily differentiate a living being from a non-living thing. So, first characteristic is living beings are made up of cells. The body of a living being is made up of tiny compartment cells. So, here they have mentioned that the body of a living being is made up of tiny compartments called as cells. A cell is the basic unit of life. If we examine an onion peel under a microscope, we will observe tiny compartments called cells. The term cell was first coined by Robert Hooke. Each cell contains living substances called protoplasm. So each cell contains living substances called protoplasm. Protoplasm performs all the functions of a cell. Organisms may be made up of one or many cells. Organisms which are made up of a single cell are very small and can be seen under a microscope. They are called as unicellular. Organisms which are made up of many cells are called multicellular. Amoeba, paramecium, and bacteria are unicellular organisms, while fish, earthworm, and dog and man are multicellular organisms. Now, okay, I'm going to just summarize all these concepts till now that I read till now. So, if we see now, till now, what I have mentioned that first is living organisms and non living organisms, right? In this case, in case of living, We can say dogs, cats, and plants are living, whereas stone, chalk, milk are non living things, right? So, how can we differentiate living and non living things? The first characteristic being living beings are made up of cells. So, living beings are made up of cells called as compartments. These are tiny compartments called as cells, and these cells are basic unit of life. The term cell was coined by a scientist whose name was Robert Hooke. And in each cell, there are living substances called as protoplasm. These perform the functions of the cell. And in case if an organism is made of one cell, it is called as unicellular. More than one means multicellular. So example of unicellular are amoeba, paramecium, whereas in case of multicellular organisms, the examples can be fish, dog, human beings, earthworm, and all animals, major animals, can be taken as examples of multicellular organisms. Moving on, activity 1.1, animal cells. Open your mouth and lightly scrape the inner part of your cheek with a finger or toothpick. Put the scrapings on a glass slide. Add a drop of water and cover it with a cover slip. Observe it under a microscope. Draw the structure of cheek cells which you see on the slide. These are animal cells. So, if you just observe this diagram figure 1.2, you guys may see that these are cells. These are cells of human cheek. Under our cheek, if we scrape some of them and put it on a glass slide and see and these scrapings under a microscope, the picture under the microscope would be like this, given as in figure 1.2. Over here, we can see clearly these are group of mini cells, not one cell, these are mini human cheek cells, under which each cell has cytoplasm and a nucleus. So, cytoplasm and nucleus are the two major components of cells. Moving on, activity 1.2. Plant cells. Take an onion and cut it into several pieces. Take a fleshy part of it. You will see a thin paper layer on the concave side. Hold this side towards you and break the piece. Tear off the thin peel. Place a small piece of this peel on a glass slide. Put a drop of water and cover it with a cover slip. Observe it under a microscope. You will observe small chamber-like structures which are called as cells. These are plant cells. In the first activity, when we scrape under cheek, we can observe human cheek cells which are actually of humans, which come under the category of animals. So we consider we consider human cheek cells as animal cells, whereas in case of plant cells, we are taking an onion and cutting into several pieces. And when we take the fleshy part of onion and see the peel of onion under a microscope, we can see the chamber-like small chamber-like structures, and these are nothing but plant cells which are present in the onion. So in figure 1.3, we can clearly see the cells of an onion peel or onion peel. Nucleus and cytoplasms are present and are indicated by arrows in the diagram. Moving on. Know your scientist. He is none other than Mr. Robert Hooke, the great scientist, who is the discoverer of what we are actually studying about, the cell. His lifetime was from 1635 to 1703. Hooke was an English polymath who played an important role in the scientific revolution through both experimental and theoretical work. In 1665, he published a book entitled Micrographia, which contained a number of microscopic and telescopic observations and some original observations in biology. Who coined the biological term cell? He is often credited with the discovery of the cell, although his microscopic his microscope was very basic, and he died in London on 3rd March 1703. So, know your scientist. Under this column, we can see that Robert Hooke, who was born in 1635, was an English polymath and the great scientist who published a book called as whose title was Micrographia, and he is the discoverer of the cell. And when he discovered cell, his microscope was also very basic, not even the latest model which we use now. And he also mentioned many of his uh, original and telescopic observations in biology subject in his book Micrographia. Moving on. Moving on to the next characteristic. The second characteristic is growth and changes. First characteristic was that living organisms or living beings are made up of cells. The second characteristic of living being differentiating from a non living thing is growth and changes. All living things grow. Growth is an irreversible change in size and mass. Animals and human beings grow to a certain size. Plants grow throughout their lifetime. A seedling grows into a plant. A puppy grows into a dog. Their growth is the result of cell division. As the number of cells increases, the organisms grow in size. The new cells also replace old cells, resulting in the growth of a baby into a boy and a boy into an adult. The growth in a non living is due to deposition of matter externally. Example, growth of a crystal. A crystal grows in size due to deposition of more particles on the outer surface of the crystal. So, in case of second characteristic, it is about growth and changes which takes place in the living organisms. And growth in case of living organisms is due to cell division takes place which takes place in living organism, whereas in case of non living organisms, it the growth refers to deposition of matter externally, right? So thus there is a huge difference between non living growth and generally what we define as living growth. I'm not saying that there are two different types of growth, non living growth and living growth, but growth is a process which is irreversible change, which takes place in case of living beings. It can be plants or animal or even human beings. The growth and the changes which has taken place due to the growth in living organisms is irreversible, right? So, moving on to the third category, living things move. So, movement is another criteria after cells and growth of living organisms. If living living organisms move. You can say that uh, you can say that even non-living things move, but how? They cannot move on their own. We mostly carry non-living objects. That doesn't mean that they move on their own. Whereas in case of living things or living organisms, they move by themselves. Movement is one of the important signs of life. Animals move from one place to another in search of food or shelter. They move to protect themselves from enemies. All plants, except some floating plants, remain fixed to the soil at one place. They show, see, plants cannot move from one place to another place, whereas they can show movement in their own bodies, in their parts. Roots of a plant always grow towards the soil, while the shoot tend to grow towards light. Non living objects do not move on their own. They are moved from one place to another with the help of an external force, which is mostly by human beings. The external force would be human beings tending to them or animals. So, these are the first three properties of or characteristic of living organisms. Fourth condition is nutrition. Fourth characteristic is nutrition. All living beings need food. Living organisms need food to survive. How do we get food? Green plants manufacture green pigment called chlorophyll on their leaves. Plants make their own food in the presence of sunlight by using carbon dioxide from air and water from the soil. Green plants are called autotrophs or producers. As they manufacture their so green plants are called as autotrophs or producer as they manufacture their own food. Since animals do not possess chlorophyll, they cannot manufacture their own food. Animals directly or indirectly depend on plants for their food. They are called heterotrophs or consumers. So, to summarize, to summarize in short, we can say that in case of nutrition, all living beings need food, right? Food can be prepared by green plants, which have a green pigment called chlorophyll, which is used chlorophyll in presence of sunlight using carbon dioxide from air and water from soil. They can prepare, green plants can prepare their own food. So they are called as autotrophs or producers. Whereas in case of animals, Animals cannot or do not possess chlorophyll, so they cannot make their own food. They cannot prepare their own food. They directly or indirectly depend on plant for their own food. Hence, they are called as consumers or heterotrophs. Right. So, in case of characteristic of living organisms, first is they are composed of cells. Second is they grow and there are changes which occur in their body. Third is movement. And fourth is they need food for their survival. Food to survive. Right? So, moving on, the fifth characteristic is living things excrete. All living organisms generate some waste in their body in different forms. They get rid of these waste products from their body through a system called as excretory system. Animals have special organs like kidney, lungs, gills, and sweat glands to remove waste from the body. The wastes are in the form of urine, sweat, exhaled air, and solid waste like feces. Plants throw out their gaseous waste products from the small openings in their leaves called stomata. The other excretory products of plants are gums and resins. So, what is the fifth characteristic of living organisms is that they excrete, right? And the it happens through a system called as excretory system, right? So, in case of animals, they have special organs like kidneys, lungs, gills in case of aquatic organisms, and sweat glands, which give out sweat from their bodies. So, these are the organs which are present in animals which excrete waste from their bodies, and these waste can be in the form of urine in case of, especially in case of humans, it can be in the form of urine, solid waste like solid feces, and exhaled air. In case of plants, they have small openings in leaves called as stomata through which they excrete. And the other excretory products of plants may be including gums, resins, which are nothing but the extra excretory part product which are released out in the form of gums and resins in case of plants. So moving on to the sixth characteristic, which is nothing but respiration. All living things need energy for their activities. The energy is obtained from the food. Living beings take in oxygen during breathing. Food is oxidized with the help of oxygen in the body to produce energy. The chemical process by which energy is released from food is called respiration. Living organisms give out carbon dioxide during respiration. Non living things do not respire. So, the sixth characteristic of a living organism is they do respire. What is respiration? So, when we take in food, we get energy from food, right? Which is used to, which that is this energy is used to uh, do many activities by our body, right? So, it is the chemical process. The respiration is nothing but chemical process by which this energy is released from the food. So while respiring, we intake O2, that is oxygen. So the food we intake is oxidized by this oxygen, and when we respire, we release out carbon dioxide, which is nothing but CO2. So, in case of respiration, respiration is nothing but breathing plus oxidizing food to produce energy. So, respiration is nothing but breathing plus oxidizing food to produce energy. So, this is called as respiration. This is the sixth important characteristic which differs or differentiates living organisms and non living things. So, the next characteristic and the seventh characteristic is response to stimulus. So, the seventh characteristic which differentiate living things from non living things is response to stimuli. All living beings respond to temperature, light, smell, etc. If we touch a hot object, we immediately withdraw our hand. So here temperature is a stimulus. The change in the environment is called stimulus, and the reaction of the organism is called as response. When we feel hungry, we eat. Plants also respond. The shoots of the plants move towards light. Roots of the plants respond to the gravity of the earth, and therefore roots go deeply into the earth. Leaves of a sensitive plant droop down and close on touching. Non living things do not respond as they cannot feel anything. So, the seventh characteristic which differentiate living organisms or living things from non living things is the response to stimulus or stimuli. Stimuli is that particular character or particular thing which makes us to respond is called as stimulus. The thing to which we respond is called stimulus, and the action of the organism due to a stimulus is called the response. For example, when we feel hungry, we automatically tend to eat something. When we feel sleepy, we just yawn. That is a reaction from our body which is taking place. So, now moving on. Do you know, although the brain makes only 2% of total body weight, it utilizes about 20% of the oxygen used by the body. Supplying oxygen to the brain also contains glucose, the principal source of energy for brain cells. If blood reaching the brain has low glucose content, dizziness, mental confusion, convulsions, and loss of consciousness may occur. So, it is a fact that uh, our blood contains glucose. If that glucose content is very, very less, then automatically we feel dizziness. We tend to just collapse on the ground. Mental confusions may occur, convulsions may occur, and as I said, loss of consciousness. We tend to lose our conscious. Moving on. Know your scientist. This person is Ivan Pavlov, who was born in 1849 and died in 1936. His lifespan was from 1849 to 1936. He was a Russian physiologist. He first observed that living organisms respond to stimuli. Sir Jagadish Chandra Bose, an Indian scientist, first observed that plants have sensitivity. Right. So, this person, Ivan Pavlov, was a Russian physiologist, and he was the first person to observe that living organisms respond to stimuli. And Sir Jagdish Chandra Bose, who was an Indian scientist, he was the first. He was the first to observe that plants have sensitivity. Now, moving on. Activity 1.3, to study how plants respond to external stimuli. Take a potted mimosa plant. Touch its leaves with your finger as shown in figure 1.6. Figure 1.6 shows that leaves of a sensitive plant droop down and close on touching. What happens to the leaves? The leaves close up and droop. Withdraw your finger and observe it again after some time. What change do you notice? The leaves have regained their shape and form. So, And this actually, I want to just add another information to this. Is nothing but mimosa is the scientific name of the plant, and this is nothing but touch me not plant. Touch me not. From the name itself, you guys can, you students can see that touch me not. If we touch the plant, the leaves just unfold, just fold very closely, and if we leave it and observe it carefully after some time, we may notice that the leaves have regained to their original shape and form. So this is a great example to that plants do respond to external stimuli. Activity 1.4. Shoots of plant move towards light. Take a potted plant and keep it in a dark. Allow light to come in from one side only through a hole as shown in figure 1.7. Figure 1.7 tells that plant shoot is phototrophic. Let's see. Observe the plant after a few days. You will notice that the shoot has tipped down, has tipped, okay, the shoot tip has bent towards light. This activity proves that shoots are phototrophic because they bend towards the direction of light. Thus, it shows movement in a plant. So, in the figure, it is uh, clearly meant sun acts a source of light, and there is a opening in the dark box, and inside the box there is a plant kept, which is a potted plant, and for the shoots respond to the sunlight and hence bend towards the sunlight, and hence we can say that shoots are phototropic in nature since they bend towards the direction of light, and thus there is a movement shown in the plant by the plant. So, till now we have studied seven characteristics of living organisms. First is they are composed of cells, and second is growth, and growth takes place from inside, and next is they reproduce, respire, they excrete, response to stimulus, they intake nutrition, and they show movement. So these are the characteristics which we have explored until now that differentiate living beings or living things from non-living things. So moving on, eighth characteristic is reproduction. All living things reproduce their young ones. Mammals like man, dog, cow produce by giving birth to their young ones, while lizards, birds, egg lay eggs. Plants reproduce by means of seeds. Non flowering plants like ferns produce by means of tiny structures called spores. The non living objects cannot reproduce. A chalk can be broken into several pieces, but each piece cannot grow into a new chalk piece. So, if we see over here, eighth characteristic is to reproduce, or reproduction, process of reproduction is the eighth characteristic of living organisms, which differentiate living things from non-living things. So all living things reproduce their young ones either by laying eggs, mostly birds and animals like lizards lay eggs, whereas mammals just give birth to their young ones. In case of plants, they just produce by seeds, and in case of non flowering plants, they produce by structures called as spores, which are their reproductive structures. So we can definitely say that the non living things or non living objects cannot reproduce. A chalk cannot see. In case of reproduction, the change takes place. There is a change. We human beings tend to reproduce and give rise to new human individuals. Whereas in case of non living things, for example, if we take a chalk, when we broke it into pieces, that that pieces cannot grow into separate individuals, right? Whereas in case of human beings, it is not like that. Human beings or plants or animals, it is not like that. In case of human beings and animals, A stands for animals and the H stands for human beings. So in case of them, we produce, that is we reproduce and give rise to babies, young ones, that is. So these babies grow up into big ones and they do reproduce, right? Moving on, in the figure 1.8, here they have mentioned the development of a chick from an egg. So first a chicken lays an egg, and that egg, inside the egg, the young one is developing. The first one is the fully formed embryo stage, and this embryo is developing here. This is the mid developed embryo, and this is almost done. It can, this young one, this young chick can anytime come from the shell. So in this last picture, the chick is coming out from the shell, right? Moving on. So activity 1.5, germination of pea. Select a few seeds of good quality pea. Take a pot and fill it up with good soil. Now put these seeds at a distance from each other in the pot. Sprinkle water and keep the pot in a corner of the room from where it has to access air and light. Observe the seeds daily for nearly 2 to 3 weeks. The pea seeds start germinating after a week. The radicle of the embryo grows first, which give rise to the roots. The plumule grows next to form a shoot. The different stages in the germination of a pea seed is given in figure 1.9. So, in figure 1.9, first radicle is formed and it just develops, and it from that plumule is formed, and then at last a pea plant is germinated fully. So, ninth characteristic is living beings have a definite lifespan. All living beings take birth, grow, get old, and finally die. Living things have a definite life period. The time period for which an organism lives is called its lifespan. Each organism has an average lifespan. Table 1.1, organisms and their average span. So, over here in the table, there are organisms' names mentioned and their lifespan mentioned. So, first organism is housefly and its lifespan is 1 to 4 months. Mouse, 2 to 3 years lifespan. Sparrow, 10 years of lifespan. Dog, 15 to 18 years of lifespan. Horse, 25 to 30 years of lifespan. Elephant, 70 to 90 years of lifespan. Land tortoise, 150 to 20 years of lifespan. So, lifespan is nothing but from the time we just grow, that is from the time from our birth until we die. The time period between our birth and death is called the lifespan. And in table 1.1, these are some of the organisms whose lifespan have been mentioned. So, next topic is plants and animals. Plants and animals are living organisms. They both have some common characteristic, but they differ from each other in many aspects. So, till now we have studied the different characteristic of living organisms. First one was they are composed of cells and they move. They do require nutrition for their development. Um, and fourth it can be respiration, reproduction, and they grow. They have a definite lifespan. They excrete, they respire. So till now we have studied there are 9 characteristics of living things which differentiate them from non-living things. So, living under living things or living organisms, plants and animals both are living organisms. So, all these 9 characteristics are present in plants and animals. But how do they differ from each other? Let's see. Plants are producers, whereas animals are consumers. Yes, in case of nutrition, plants can prepare their own food. Thus, they are called as heterotrophs. Sorry, thus they are called as autotrophs and are also called as producers of nutrition. Whereas in case of animals, they are called as heterotrophs and are called consumers. Basic difference also lies in their cell structures also. Movement in animals is different. They move from one place to another in search of food and shelter. Plants also show movement, but it is not the same kind as seen in animals. In plants, stem grows towards sunlight, root turns towards water and soil. Sunflower changes its direction towards the sun. Similarly, growth takes place in both plants and animals, but there are some differences between them. And those differences are mentioned below in this table 1.2, right? So, table 1.2, differences between living and non living things. Living things. First point is living things or living beings are made up of cells and they have a definite shape, whereas in case of non living things, they lack cellular structure. Living beings consume food to obtain their energy, whereas that in case of non living things, they do not take any food. Living organisms break down energy to carry on life process, that is they respire, whereas non-living things do not respire. Growth of an organisms takes place due to cell division in case of living things, whereas growth in a non-living object is occurring due to deposition of material in the body and it is very external, whereas in case of living things it is internal. Living beings move in search of food and shelter, whereas in case of non living things they do not move on their own. They need an external force to make them move, like a motor car moves with the help of petrol. Living beings respond to stimuli, whereas non living things do not respond to stimuli. Living organisms produce their own kind, that is, living things reproduce their own kind to maintain their race, whereas non living things do not reproduce. They can only or may only break into different several pieces. All living things are born, grow, reproduce, and die. There is a life cycle in case of living organisms, whereas there is no such life cycle present in non living things. Living things excrete to remove waste from their body, whereas there is no excretory system found in non living objects. So, there are totally 10 differences which make non living things and living things differ from each other. Table 1.3. So, in table 1.2, we studied the differences between living and non living things, whereas in table 1.3, we are going to study the differences between plants and animals. Plants, all green plants, make their own food, and the process is known as photosynthesis. Whereas in case of animals, animals cannot synthesize their own food. They depend on other animals or plants for their food. Plants remain fixed and do not move, whereas animals can move freely in search of food and shelter. Plants grow throughout their life period, whereas in case of plants, in case of plants, the growth is unlimited, whereas in case of animals, it is limited to certain period. After that, they do not grow. Growth happens, but it is limited in case of animals. Fourth is plants reproduce by producing seeds and spores, whereas animals lay eggs or give birth to their young ones. Plants show response of lesser degree as they lack sense organs and nervous system, whereas in case of animals show responses to greater degree as they possess nervous systems and sense organs. And moving on, actually, after this, the chapter is over. Moving on to the summary to summarize this lesson. Let us summarize. Living beings are made up of cells. First thing. Second, living beings show basic process of growth, movement, respiration, reproduction, excretion, whereas in case of non-living objects, they do not show such processes. Organisms take in food. Green plants are autotrophs while animals are heterotrophs. Animals respond to changes in the environment. Animals reproduce their young ones. Animals and plants are living organisms, but there are many differences between them. Basic difference between plants and animals lies in their cellular structure. Now moving to the exercise part. Subjective evaluation. A. Answer the following questions briefly. List any two characteristics of briefly means in short. So these are short answers. List any two characteristic of living organisms. One is they reproduce, and other can be respiration. They respire. Okay, this is first answer. You can also write any other. There are totally 10 characteristics which differentiate living organisms or living thing from non-living things. I have mentioned two. You can mention any other 8 also. What are autotrophs? So the second question is, what are autotrophs? Green plants are called autotrophs or producers as they manufacture their own food. Right? That is, autotrophs are nothing but organisms which prepare or manufacture their own food. Right? And next question is, what is the meaning of growth? Growth, what is the meaning of growth, right? In case of growth, what is growth? Growth is nothing but growth is an irreversible change in size and mass. Animals and humans grow to a certain size. So, this growth is an irreversible change in size and mass. This is the definition of growth. So, next question is, fourth question is, point out one difference in plant and animal. The basic difference between plants and animals lies in their cellular structure. That is, the plant cell and animal cell structure is the main difference. between plants and animals. Name a unicellular animal. So, in case of unicellular animal, amoeba is the answer. Name a multicellular animal. Fishes. Fish is an example, right? In case of unicellular animal, we can also write paramecium. Next, moving on. Answer in detail. What do you mean by responsiveness? Explain with example. So we have to write what do you mean by responsiveness, and we should also give an example. So all living beings respond to temperature, light, smell, etc. If we touch a hot object, we immediately withdraw our hand. Temperature is a stimulus over here. The change in the environment is called the stimulus, and the reaction of the organism is called response. When we feel hungry, we eat. Plant also respond. For example, the shoots of the plants move towards light, whereas the roots of the plant respond to the gravity of the earth and therefore they go deep into the earth. Leaves of a sensitive plant like touch me not droop down and close on touching. Non living things do not respond as they cannot feel anything. So that was the answer for responsiveness with the example. The second question is in answer in detail is what do you mean by growth? Growth and changes. So what do you mean by growth? We should answer in detail. All living things grow, and growth is an irreversible change which in size and mass. Animals and human beings grow to a certain size. Plants grow throughout their lifetime. A seedling grows into a plant. A puppy grows into a dog. These are examples. Their growth is the result of cell division. As the number of cell increases, the organisms grow in size. The new cells also replace the old cells, resulting in the growth of a baby into a boy and a boy into an adult. The growth in a non-living is due to deposition of matter externally. For example, growth of a crystal. A crystal grows in size due to the deposition of more particles on the outer surface of the crystal. That's the answer for this question. Moving on to the next question. Third question is why is reproduction important? Why is reproduction important? Reproduction is important because living organisms reproduce their own kind to maintain their generations, their race, right? Moving on. Differentiate between living things and non living and non-living things. So over here the table 1.2. The table 1.2 over here differentiates living things and non-living things. First is they are made up of cells. Next is they consume food for energy and they break down energy to carry out their life process, growth of an organism, and they move, they respond to stimulus, they reproduce, they born, grow, reproduce, and die. That is, they have a lifespan. And last is they excrete to remove waste from their body. So, this table 1.2 shows the differences between living and non living things. The next question is, what is an excretory system? Name some excretory organs found in living organisms. So, over here in the fifth point, all living organisms generate some waste in their body in different forms. They get rid of these waste products. They get rid of these waste products from their body through a system called as excretory system. In case of animals, they have special organs like kidneys, lungs, gills, and sweat glands to remove their waste from the body. The waste can be in the form of urine, sweat, exhaled air, solid waste like feces, and in case of plants, they have gaseous waste products and they excrete through their openings called as stomata, and their other excretory products are in the form of gums and resins. Next is objective evaluation. C, fill in the blanks. Fill in the blanks. So first is living things are made up of cells. Jelly like semi liquid substances present in cell is called as protoplasm. P R O T O P L A S M, protoplasm. The third question is, an organism made up of single cell is called unicellular. Removal of waste from the body is known as excretion. Organisms that cannot make their own food are called as heterotrophs. H E T E R O T R O P H S. Question D. Certain characteristics are given below. Sort them out for plants and animals. Growth unlimited. Growth unlimited in case of plants. So it is P. Locomotion. It is for animals. So A. Nervous system. It is well developed in animals. So it is A. A stands for animals and P stands for plants. Please take a note. Can prepare their own food. Plants can prepare their own food. So it is P. Grow towards light. It is plants. So it is P. Well developed excretory system. It is in case of animals. So it is A. So animals, the three characteristics of animals are locomotion, nervous system, and well developed excretory system. And for plants, it is growth unlimited, can prepare their own food, and grows towards light. Question E. Write true T or false F against the following statements. Growth is unlimited in plants. It is true. So we can just write T for first question. Second is animals are autotrophs. No, it is false because plants are autotrophs. So second question it is false. So F. Third question. Removal of waste from the body is called nutrition. No. Removal of waste from the body is called excretion. So it is false. Amoeba is a single celled animal. No. Amoeba is a single celled animal. Yes, it is a single cell. Amoeba and paramecium are unicellular animals. So it is true. Fifth question is fifth question is lungs and kidneys are excretory organs found in animals. Yes, true. So that's all for this chapter. Meeting in the next video. Until then, thank you for your patient listening, and if you really like the content and explanation, like, subscribe, and keep waiting for more updates. Thank you. Thank you, students.